Helen, thanks so much for joining me. It's an unusual time in our lives, and I know a lot of athletes and coaches and sports administrators. It's a very uncertain time as well. Um, if you would just give everybody a little bit of a background of who you are, how you got to where you are, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm a former college basketball coach. I coached at a lot of different places all over the country, and really, really enjoyed it. I retired from coaching about 9 years ago, and I do a couple of things now. One is I consult with coaches on career and professional development, um, because when I decided to get out of coaching, I wasn't prepared for what I was going to do when I grew up. So that's one of the things that was not a great feeling. And so I work with coaches now to help them either evolve in their coaching career now or get ready for the next step while they're still coaching, which is not an easy thing to do. And then the other thing I do is I do television. I'm a color commentator for basketball. So it keeps me around the game, but on my own terms, and I get a chance to stay connected. So those are the two main things that I do right now.
So I'm going to ask you kind of a part one and a part two because you're doing two different things, and I really want to talk about the commentary because it's something I do, and it's something I've had to teach myself. So I want to kind of tap into to kind of your expertise there. Talk a little bit about what you do for professional development. You said you help coaches with professional development. What do you mean by that? How does it actually work?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we as coaches that makes us great at what we do, but also sometimes hinders our development is that we have a servant leadership mentality. And we're always thinking about other people. We're always thinking about our student athletes. We're always thinking about our staff and in terms of development, things like that. And we forget that the better we are, the better quality of experience the people that we work for and work with will have. And so I think it's really important to develop yourself as a coach holistically, not just in X's and O's, but in the other areas outside of coaching that have nothing to do with the court or field, but everything to do with whether or not you're successful. So I work with coaches to help them understand how to take a look at themselves, be self-reflective, be self-aware, and understand what it is that they need to do better. So I do for them basically what they do for their players. You know, we look at our players and we have this vision and this from which we make decisions, this big context from which we make decisions for our program. And we look at them, we bring them into our programs because of what they can offer, their skill set. But we also, once we get them in our program, we look at what their strengths and their challenges are. And we basically make a workout to say, hey, listen, you need to work more on your left hand. So here's your workout that you need to do over the summer. Mm-hmm. But we don't do that for ourselves as coaches, right? We don't start from the beginning point A and have an idea of what point Z is going to be and then work to connect the dots in between as a professional. And that means acquiring skills. That means enhancing skills. And I think that's really, really important because the better you are as a coach and a person, the better quality of experience your student athletes will have, the better leader you'll be for your staff in terms of development.
Can you give me a typical example of how you would work with somebody? Let's say I came to you and I'm a Division II golf coach or something like that. Right. And, I want to get better. I want to be better not only in the institution that I'm working at, but I want to be more successful, maybe move up to D1 someday. Right. How do you take me through the process of how you would work with me, what you would do?
Sure. Well, the first thing I do is we go over the resume line by line. Mm-hmm. And the reason I do that, well, it's twofold. One is so that I get to know my client better. The other is to help my client understand whether or not they are portraying themselves and the value that they can add to an organization correctly. And I think with coaches, we don't think about that on our resume. We don't take an academic approach to our resume, if you will.
Right.
We put state university, I did these 4 things. And then, another university, I did the same 4 things, right? And so we're not accurately reflecting what our skill set is. We put a lot of tasks on our resumes, but we don't put skills. And so I go through line by line because I want them to understand you're basically on your resume selling yourself, and people are looking at it, and then the average person looks at your resume, hiring manager, maybe 7 seconds. And so you have to portray yourself correctly. So if you have, say, for instance, budgeting is a big piece of any entity, whether it's coaching or not. And if you've not done or if you have done a budget, then you need to quantify, right? So if you've worked with a budget of, I don't know, $5,000, then I'm assuming you could work with a budget of $50,000. It's just,
an extra zero.
An extra zero. However, I know that you have that skill, right? And so I'll work with some clients and I'll go, I've never done a budget. And I go, I thought you just told me that, you did the budget for your, for your church. Money's money, right? So accurately reflecting the skills that you have that can add value to an organization are really important. So we start with that. And then after that, what I want to know from them is what types of relationships do you have, right? Because you have to decide, first of all, and let me backtrack here. I always ask people what their end goal is, what your end point is. You're at point A, what's your point Z? And my job is to help you get there. I don't, when I work with clients, I go, I'm not an agent. I don't get you jobs. That's not what I do. What I do is I help you figure out the best fit for you and help you, once you get that job, stay in that job, right? And so based on where they'd like to be, what kind of relationships do you have, or what kind of relationships do you need to develop? What kind of skills do you have? What kind of skills do you need to acquire and enhance, acquire or enhance? And so those are two basic things that I think are important, is just the relationships, looking at the relationships and the skills that you have, taking an inventory of yourself and seeing what you need to do. And then I help them figure that out, what it is they need to do, and then, either give them a resource or help them with that particular thing. I think relationships are very, very important in terms of any type of job that you'd like to get, but genuine, mutually beneficial relationships, not just, hey, Tim, here's my card,
Right. Right.
When I was a younger coach, I used to think, okay, if I go to this event and there are all these people, I need to collect as many cards as possible. But that wasn't the right way. Now, if I go somewhere and let's say there's 100 people there, if I have 3 genuine conversations, 3 genuine connections that I can cultivate, again, that are mutually beneficial, then that's way better than collecting, 97 other cards.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does completely. So do you provide professional development, or do you find ways that they can achieve professional development elsewhere?
I actually do both. It depends on what the clients need. Not everybody needs the same thing. There are some fundamental things that people need, but if it's a younger coach which I work with a lot, trying to get to the next level, they need help understanding what skills they need to get on that next level. If they want to go, I've had clients that want to go from high school to college. Okay, so what do you need to do there? I've had assistants in college who want to go to be head coaches. So what do I need to do to ultimately reach that goal? And I can't do everything, and I don't have that big of an ego to say, okay, I can help you with everything. And so I will point them towards some resources if there's something that they need that is not in my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So without being maybe too specific, because I don't want to pry, at the same time I've got to ask some hard questions. How does it work? Because one of the questions I always have coming in offering graduate education for coaches, the question is, well, can coaches make a living? Can coaches of coaches make a living? And clearly you are, which is why we're having this conversation. So what ways do you recruit people to your programs and your business? And then how does it work in terms of payment or that process? If we go back to me, how would I pay you monthly? Is it a year contract? How does that work specifically?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to understand that coaches need coaches too,
Hmm.
right? And we don't really think about that. And I think that's the most important concept. So I have people that reach out to me. I have clients that recommend other people. People go to my website. And so I do it in different ways. When I work with someone, I can do one individual session, but that doesn't really do a whole lot as far as I'm concerned if you are truly invested in your professional development, right? So now I can do, one session and go over your resume and help you with that, right? And maybe look at a second draft and maybe that's okay. But in terms of a holistic approach, which is what I believe in, I think you need to have more than one session. So normally what I will do is I will have the client commit to at least 6 months.
Okay.
And then after 6 months, they can reevaluate where they are. If they want to be at a certain place at 6 months and they're there and they're fine, then that's okay. And they move on. I've had clients work for 6 months. I've had clients that I've worked with for 5 years. I've had clients who I've worked with for a year and they leave and they go, okay, I'm good now. But then they come back later and say, hey, listen, now I've decided I wanted to work on whatever. Let's work together again. And so I have some that are in and out. But initially, I think it's important to spend at least 6 months because never underestimate the power of follow up and accountability in coaches, because we ask for that from our players, our athletes. But again, going back to that servant leadership, we don't hold ourselves accountable. So if you're going to pay me, then I assume that there's some sort of built-in accountability where you're going to at least be invested in your development. But I tell coaches, listen, you're grown people, and so you do need to be accountable for yourself. And if I get to a point, I've never gotten to this point, but if I get to a point where a client just isn't accountable, then that's more important to me than the money. Then I'll just go, okay, this isn't something that you're really invested in right now for whatever reason. It could be family time or whatever. Maybe we started and now you don't have the time, and that's more than fine. But let's take a break, and then if you want to come back later, then we can revisit that, because life happens.
Yeah, for sure. So when you work with them for 6 months, is this you meet them once a month, or is it whenever they need to? What does that mean as well?
It's different for different people. So
So they just pay for basically a 6 month contract. It's a flat fee, and
yeah,
then
it's
you're
a flat
available.
fee. We have
I see.
a bare minimum of at least 2 hours a month, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
every coach, that's different. Like some coaches want to do the whole 2 hours in
Yeah.
one session. I have some coaches who want to do 2 1-hour sessions. I have some coaches who want to do 4 sessions a month so that they have shorter time in between their homework, right? So it depends on the coach and their time. And there are times when I schedule, okay, Tim, we're going to meet on April 1st at 4:30. Some student comes in the office, something happens, and we have to reschedule.
Yeah.
I don't get upset because that's what happens when you're coaching. The kids come first, so I go, okay, we'll just reschedule. But generally, a total of 2 hours, and I'm not going to say if we went over 2 hours and you have an event that you need to talk with me about.
Right.
Oh no.
Right.
That's another $50. No,
Right.
I make myself available to my clients.
Okay. I should just mention for people watching, if you have a question for Helen, just put it in your chat box and it should come to us and we can upload it for you. Let's kind of switch track. You also talked about being a commentator. Talk a little bit about how you got into that and what's that like?
Yeah, well, when I got out of coaching in 2011, I knew I wanted to stay around the game. And so I wasn't really sure how to do that. And so, again, this goes back a little bit to professional development. I thought I wanted to do administration. I thought that was a natural progression from coaching, because when you run a program, you're basically an administrator. However, I did not have the relationships that I needed to get that opportunity. And so I literally got on the phone. I called every administrator. I was up in Boston at the time. There's a ton of schools there. And I said, hey, listen, I I think I want to do administration. I'm not really sure how that works. Can you help me? And so I visited a lot of administrators. Long story short, Julie Serrero, who was the former athletic director at MIT, created an internship for me while I was there, because I knew I wanted to work with coaches too, and I needed to see the other side, because we want what we want when we want it, and I wasn't privy to the administrative part. So while I was there doing my internship with her, they needed somebody to do commentary. At that time, they were just beginning the streaming, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where I started. I started doing streaming commentary on streaming for the men's and the women's basketball at MIT, and I just got hooked. I thought it was a great way to stay in the game. I think it's really, really important when you do television. These kids, they work so hard at what they do that they deserve somebody that's prepared, that understands the game, that knows their name, knows how to pronounce it correctly, can understand what's going on, can relate some nice stories about the players. And somebody's mom and dad's watching, so get the name right. Get the name right. But I just enjoyed, to me, it was just like coaching, because I prepared just like I would for a game as if I was going to coach it. I watched an awful lot of film, which is funny because I hated watching film when I was a coach. When I started out, you could go watch live. And so I loved doing that, and I hated it when they switched over to just film. And so I didn't know at the time, but all the times where I was watching games live prepared me for television years down the road. Mm-hmm. And so I watched a lot of film. I talked to the coaches, talked to the players, just to get a full picture so that I can give the viewer a full picture of what's going on in the game. But also, I think it's important to teach the game without being too technical. People want to know what's going on, instead of just saying that Tim Backhurst, scored a layup. How did he get open, and how did they decide to make that change to run that particular option or whatever? And so I just really, really enjoy it, because I feel like I'm still coaching. However, when the game's over, I can go home. I can go home, and I don't have to. There's no post-game speeches. I don't have to worry about, well, this person didn't play enough, or I probably should have made that decision, or whatever. So it keeps me around the game, but on my own terms.
That's great. That's great. Let me kind of, last question for me is one that is kind of tying into what you do for a living, and it goes back to coaching and coach development. And if you had advice for those coaches who are maybe new into the field or looking to get into coaching, maybe those who are early in their careers looking to kind of move up, as we've talked about, what advice would you give them based on your experiences working with those that you have?
Well, the first thing obviously is to know your craft, right? You need to be a subject matter expert. Sure. And you obviously need to spend time doing that. But I think just taking a holistic approach to your career, understanding, where you want to be. Am I the type of coach that, wants to be a Division III, Division II, or Division I? They're all different levels. They all have different nuances, different expectations, different philosophies. So what fits me best as a person? Where do I want to be? What part of the country do I want to live in? Take all of those things into consideration. And then obviously off the court, develop yourself as a person, then put all that together. And once you've done that, then develop the relationships that you need to get the opportunities that you want. I think that's really important. People fill out applications, and that's all well and good. But quite honestly, by the time it gets posted, it's probably already decided, right? And so that posting is for more often than not legal purposes. I have to post it for however many weeks. And so you need to develop the relationships that are going to get you to your ultimate goal. And I think that's what a lot of coaches don't do well, and they don't understand. You probably know everybody that you need to know to get where you want to be, but are you cultivating and developing the relationships based on that are going to help you reach your ultimate goal?
Mm. Yeah, I was once told by somebody who came into my class to as a guest lecturer, and he said it's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake. And And he left my class, and I asked my class, I said, so what do you think about that? Oh yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And I said, well, I think he's wrong. And of course, you know, I get the looks, right? And the reality is, as I told them, it's the grades you make and the hands you shake. And it's exactly what you just said. You have to know your craft, but then you also have to have the ability to develop those relationships that give you the opportunity for those jobs. And too often, I think coaches may focus on one and not the other. And some of them tend to focus on the relationships and get the job, and then we find out they don't really know what they're doing. And some coaches may know exactly what they're doing and how to do it right, but just don't have the connections to really flourish in an environment where they're the best fit. And I think that's where somebody like yourself can be very valuable, because you see maybe the bigger picture as opposed to somebody who's, you know, a young coach who hasn't had a lot of experience outside their state, for example.
Yeah, and I think that often, especially with young coaches now, the idea of building a relationship with someone you don't know
Mm-hmm.
is very scary.
Especially
Um,
face to face.
Especially face to face. And so I work a lot with young coaches on verbiage and you know, how to approach people and how to just be yourself, but at the same time you've got to help that person understand what value you bring, what possible value you can bring, whether it's to their organization or to someone else's organization. And I tell coaches that every hiring manager, certainly every AD, has a list in her or his right-hand drawer of 6 to 10 people that they would look at if there was ever a need to hire someone, whether they fired someone or someone left for a better opportunity. Your job is to get people to advocate to get you on that list, right? And so that's part of building the mutually beneficial relationships. That's part of of why you need to do that. And you run into coach, oh, I applied for all these jobs and no one's calling me back. Well, if you have the right relationships, yes, you need to apply for the job, but someone's going to call and advocate for you and at least get you in front of that person. Now, it's obviously up to you to get the job and do well in the interview, but at least to get in front of that person or on that person's mind, someone needs to call and advocate for you. And if no one knows you, no one knows who you are, no one knows how well you do your job, then it's going to be virtually impossible to get on that list.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, either they have questions or more interested in working with you, what's the best way to do that?
Several ways. For the folks who use Twitter, I am at HMW Sports, so that's HMWSPORTS. They can DM me. They can go to my website, hmwsportsconsulting.com. They can call me at 888-412-1112, or they can email me at hmwsc@outlook.com. So I think I covered every demographic there.
No excuses.
Well, and of course, they can get in touch with you if they want to.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, and look forward to putting this video up online as well after the live stream. So if you do have questions for Helen, reach out to her, and I'm sure she'd be happy to help.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.